Hello. It is hotter than, I don't even know. I can't come up with things right now. It's too hot today in Portland. There's an air conditioner going on in the background. If you hear it, I don't care. I'm also in the middle of just doing a kind of a self-carry day, hence I've got some eye patch thingies that may or may not be sinking down my face. I'm 30. I am 30, and I figured this video was just gonna be me kind of rambling about that and how I feel in general about this supposed substantial aging situation. I crossed a hurdle. I had some interesting feelings about that. Anyone who is significantly over the age of 30 will of course always tell everyone it's a fucking age. It's not that big a deal. You have so much more life ahead of you. And one of my favorite things to hear, and I've heard it regularly from people, is, oh, your 30s are so much better than your 20s. I heard it ever since like I turned the age of 22. They're like, you kind of stumble through your 20s and then you get to your 30s and you know more of who you are. You have, it seems like, finally, hopefully, adult level money. I mean, depending on your situation, that could be totally different, but like you have more money, or the ability to gain a little more money than you did back in the day. You have a better understanding of yourself, where you stand on things. Where maybe before your political ideals, your spirituality leanings, all of that thing might have been just kind of, maybe not directly off of what your parents or your community gave you, but similar-ish, right? Like it was always a little bit, or just slightly tail-ended of it. Like that's how I felt, at least. I feel like I kind of like left my parents' house, went to college. I moved out right at 18. It was very much a, not far off from what they were saying, but you know what, but like it was a little bit off, and it felt like so substantial. Whereas now, little Miss Pagan leftist witch over here, it's all very different. Like comparing a 30-year-old me to 20-year-old me is very, very vastly different. But I do think that overall, 20-year-old me would look at all the things that I have accomplished and be very proud and be like, fuck yeah, that makes sense, even if there are surprises. When I was 20, I had my life planned out by the neighborhoods of Chicago. But me ending up in Portland, I think Chicago me would have been like, shocked. She'd still agree with the decision overall. This makes sense to it. Same thing with becoming a full-on witch. Exploring that shit I was definitely doing back in my 20s. Lots of dabbling even before I fully dedicated myself. You know, it was constantly a thing I constantly dipped my toe into, but was always too scared of being perceived as too woo or crazy, or maybe even getting drawn into a cult. Like there was a lot of concerns I had where I would and then I'd back away from it, and then like not address anything spiritually for a long time, feel lost, feel confused, come back to it again and again and again. And so now having this like established practice, knowing where I am spiritually, that really helps. I think spiritually too has helped me with the concept of aging and getting older and coming into my own, the idea of womanhood being so much more than just this youth little section that is shown to us in like film and movies and commercials and yada yada. The entire concept of the wizened, aged crone, that is actually an ideal I really, really look up to, and I'm really, really excited to ever enter that stage of my life. You know, being a little cackling weird crone in the corner is still so far off in the future, that archetype that I could hopefully step into and become. So that the fact that that is eventually my end goal and so far in the future, it makes this feel much less of a, oh my god, I'm 30 and life's over, which I think I wouldn't have necessarily found if I didn't step into witchcraft and paganism and explored so many of these other archetypes. But I would be lying if there are other parts of society that have bothered me in some way. The concept of aging physically and knowing that that is in possibly some way going to devalue who I am to some people, even if those people are not to be fucking listened to. Fuck off all the fucking way. If I have a few more wrinkles or a gray hair appears and you have a problem with that, yeah, like, even though I can logically understand that, there is another part of me that still goes, oh, but like my worth has decreased. There is still a huge amount of pressure, I guess, in a weird accomplishment sense. And I think this is where I get most of my hang-ups on with turning 30, is if life is a video game, right? And if I have reached level 30, it's interesting how if I think of my life in like statistics of like, oh wow, if I have level 30 in spirituality and level 30 over here, but it feels in other levels of my life, other realms, other statistics, I have not reached level 30 yet. It feels like I have gotten to this level while having a very low percentiles in sections I should have also be at level 30. It makes me think of relationships, owning property, maybe more money in the bank, so many things that as a society just naturally aren't accessible to many people in my generation anymore because of the fucking economy and the pandemic and just shit in fucking general, right? But still in a weird fucking way feels like a personal failing, and I can't entirely wrap my mind around the idea of that. And I think that's interesting, is trying to logic ourselves out of things that we feel and things that have kind of been drilled into us by life, whether it's your culture, your society, your friend group, what have you. And especially when it comes to like the ticking clock thing and the spirituality, one of the things that gave me solace and now also feels in a weird way like a ticking clock was the idea of my Saturn return. Knowing that I am currently in the middle of it. I think it won't be until I'm 31. I don't think until I'm fully through it. Saturn return has so far teaching me a shit ton of lessons, all of which I will not recap until it is fully over, because I feel like there's a lot of references, but the amount of journaling that I have done around it, ooh, it has been thorough. This very big coming of age, Saturn kind of putting you through your tests of being like, hey, what have you learned through the section of your life so far? Are you making the proper alignments to where you want to be? I think I've slowly but surely made more strides, but I'm still being taught some very severe fucking lessons, which sucks. But you do what you gotta do. And there is a certain level of me that worries of, well, what if I don't learn all the lessons? Right? What if I get out of my Saturn return and when it comes to the cosmos understanding of my leveling up and my understanding, like, even there of course is more time to learn, there's always more in my mind, there's more time to learn, there's more existence, there's always more ways for our consciousness to continue on. I want to learn it now. I want to have as much as I can understand now. I want to make strides and do these things so I can achieve certain things. And I was having a very interesting conversation with one of my cousins who turned 30 back in October, and we were talking about how there are other people who are very much on different paths of life, where me and her seem to be in certain levels very similar paths. And we were talking about how our siblings or our cousins are, you know, getting to experience certain coming of age moments, for example with like a partner, and we're never gonna have that. Like, it's weird to us to conceptualize the idea of, wow, they got to go through this thing with someone, they got to, you know, do major traveling or whatever with a partner and romantic, and like that was a big thing for them, whereas we don't get that feeling of weirdly almost wanting to hold off on certain life events because we wanted to experience them with a romantic partner of some type, and that person is nowhere in fucking sight. And it's having this weird coming to terms moment of just do it alone. Like, yeah, you're not gonna have that being that first experience with that partner, but you could have another experience with them down the line whenever they deign to come in. And I think just like natural coming of age things, it's a normal thing to reflect on that, on the paths you did take, the paths you did not take. Are there any regrets? Are there not? Even if there is no way for you to go back, and the best thing is just to look. I think it is important to, in some respects though, reflect and go, do I concur so far with all my decisions? Is there something I truly would have done differently? Well, I think at the current moment I am, I guess, benefited enough to say no, there isn't anything that would solidly make me feel a huge amount of regret. There is still a level of curiosity for those paths not taken. And I think too, so much of what I think, especially the last couple of years with the pandemic and our government doing fucked up bullshit left and goddamn right now, is the, I guess, hope that one has when you are younger. And I don't necessarily think that it's something inherently beaten out of you. as you age, where you're like, oh wow, like when life just keeps kicking you in the teeth. But there is definitely a certain part of me after the last couple of years that just doesn't have the same amount of rose-colored look at the world. And I guess that there's a level of me that's mourning that. That's mourning my level of optimism, mourning my faith in things turning out okay. But in a weird way, that's also a celebration of odd opportunities and chaos. If you know me on my channel, most of the deities that I worship, so much of my craft is based around the concept that change is the only true internal. Chaos is not inherently bad, it is just the unpredictable. And my releasing of the ability of control, I think, is really interesting, and at the end of it makes me feel more solid and assured in myself. I think you can, like, in your head logically decide so many things, and yet intuitively you never know if you 100% believe it or not. It takes a lot more than just thinking the thought and repeating the thought in your head to truly have it like ingrained in you. Like, these deeply held beliefs are a lot harder to upheave, and I can feel like I'm in the process of upheaving so many of ones that no longer serve me, but I can still feel like their roots are in there. It feels like I'm digging out a stump. Like, you can, like, I have the leverage of that shovel, like it's deep down in there, but there's still part of the roots that are there and deep, and if I don't dig all the way down and get them all out, kill them at the root, then they will still regrow, they will still cling in there. There will still be a part of me that, when I'm in a reactive state of some sort, will fall back on this line of thinking that isn't going to do well, and my emotions seem to just roll into them so fucking easily. And I think that's one of the things that is weird enough to me, is I thought I would have so much of my true framework of the universe and all of this sussed out by 30. That is clearly not the case. Like, I just started therapy very recently. I haven't been doing that long. Mixing that in with everything else going on and continuing to reevaluate where I want to go with life too, I think is the unsteadiness that I feel is what I think is the most shocking to me. I wanted to feel more steady. I wanted to feel like life would be more solid or grounded in some way, because, oh wow, I've got 30 years down, right? Like, that's a solid foundation there to then build even more on top of. And instead of feeling like I've got a nice cement bedrock situation going on, it does feel like I'm still figuring out where the quicksand is. Some parts are firm, some parts are sticky, and I don't necessarily know which is gonna give way underneath me as I continue to move forward and build on my life. And that's a hard thing for me to wrap my mind around. And I think the most interesting thing is I am working a lot more on trusting my instincts, getting back into that intuitive feeling. Another one of me and my friends were talking about how, you know, when we were in our teens or our early 20s, there was a level of understanding of our intuition. Like, we just trusted it to a degree that, I don't know, like, I remember some people to a point calling me almost egotistical when I was younger, because I had such a strong intuition, and it didn't matter a lot of times what logic you put in front of me with certain things. I still followed that intuition, and I have to say, looking back, I have never once been steered wrong by my intuition. It's always fucked me over when I have not listened to it. And whereas now I find it harder to listen to my intuition. And I think that's one of the reasons probably why that bedrock that I thought would be there when I turned 30 isn't there, because I am now questioning what decisions I made based off of intuition versus what decisions were not based off that, were based off of someone else's logic that have not proven to be solid enough for me, that have like weaseled their way into my thought process that I haven't even entirely recognized as not my own yet. That's a tricky thing to figure out, man. It'll probably take years, I know. Every time I hear it, like, mindset shifts take years. I was like, do they fucking have to? It's the air sign in me. I can't. I want immediacy. I'm not a patient person. Ugh. And like learning this patience, learning that like, yeah, I'm digging this stuff, finding the unsolid parts that are weird. But to end on a more positive note, I think overall, because that is kind of this underlying questioning stuff. As always, as I like to promote, chaos is just the unknown, and positives can pop up in that unknown. And I do kind of like that. I like that as the older and older I've gotten, the more I have lived in the moment and truly been in the moment, not thinking a few months or so down the line is like as far as I can go right now. I have of course some long-term planning in place that is just logical for any adult, aka some savings for retirement, some things kind of locked around whatever, but so much more of my life is just figuring out what is good for the next 6 months to a year and what is good for me right now this month, and I feel way more content in that. That huge level of anxious worry about the future, while still definitely there, feels more minimal or more easily handled, I guess, between the techniques I've learned now through therapy, mixing in with my witchcraft and my spiritual practice. And I think those two now mixed together have given me a really strong foundation to where my anxieties are more easily handled about long-term stuff. So I don't like sit there like planning for it 10,000 times. I can catch myself in that loop a lot sooner, and therefore have been way happier, more happier from day to day. I'm eternally curious about how the rest of my Saturn return is gonna go, while also nervous about it in a negative way. But yeah, that's kind of my weird roundabout opinion on my 30s and this weird upheaval bullshit that's going on right now. Comment down below every age range, because this is what I think is so fascinating, is the mix of older people who have already lived this part of their life, looking back, knowing that maybe they can look back and like look at my anxieties and be like, oh no, I remember feeling that way, like, you know, there are so many good things coming, your 30s are great, yada yada, those reassurances, or maybe it was a more tumultuous time for you. I love hearing that, but I also love hearing from younger people too, who are like, I don't know, like hearing from younger people and hearing their pessimism and their optimisms and just the variety of opinions, because it's not all wisdom comes from age, right? I think so much of wisdom just comes from experience and acknowledging that so many people have different experiences than my own. And I always find the most fascinating wisdoms come from the most fascinating experiences that I never even thought possible. So those can come from any age range. So comment all those down below. What years have felt like the most pivotal to you? Is it some classic traditional thing like 30 whatever coming in? I've always had in my mind for the longest time that 29, 32, 33-ish was gonna be like a big year for me. So in a weird way, I feel like I'm not quite there yet, which in a weird way does tie in also to a bit of my Saturn return happening, where it's like 31, 32. That's about, I think it's like 31 and a half is when it's complete, over, done with. So that'll be interesting to look into. So in a weird way, I'm kind of like in that midway point of that. So there could be even more coming from that front. Anyway, I hope you all are taking care of yourselves, no matter what stage of life you're in. Stay safe out there, even with this fucking crazy nonsense. And I'll see you guys in the next one.